सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्तिः शान्तिः शान्तिः। गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णुः गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुरेव परं ब्रह्म तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। Hari Om. When it comes to a Vedantic study, we complicate it a lot more than it has to be. Of course, this knowledge is hard to understand. It's subtle. Some even call it esoteric. But we really complicate it. Because we ask those deep, penetrating questions. But the instrument that we're using to ask those deep, penetrating questions is generally not deep and penetrating. That's the issue that I face. So there's so many arguments that can be made to find out what is the cause of my sorrow. Because at a certain point in existence, we get away from this notion that life is all rosy. I understand that there's a heavy amount of sorrow in life, heavy amount of pain moment to moment. Why is that the case? That's the first step to a spiritual awakening. Why is life so hard? Now, going to a Vedantic text, the basic thing it tells me is the reason for my sorrow is avidya, ignorance. Now, we say ignorance of what? Your true identity. What does that true identity mean? Something you won't understand. Those are the answers that we get. And as we bore deeper and deeper into how this avidya comes about, why is it there, then we get into all of these intellectual gymnastics. And still, what we're left with is, what steps do I take from here? Give me an A, B, C. Tell me what to do going forward. Don't just point and say, this is ignorance, this is how it starts. Now, the beauty of the text we're going to look at this week is, it's a mere 42 shlokas taken from one chapter in Srimad Bhagavatam. That's all it is. But in this one text, it not only focuses on that highest knowledge and highest reality, takes us from the very beginning of what are the external issues I'm facing, how does that internally affect me, what are the tangible steps I can take here and now to see improvement in this personality. Because oftentimes we want to leapfrog that. In our sorrow, we go to a wise person, what is it I should do? They say, keep your mind calm, practice this, and then we say, come on, I've tried all of that, it doesn't work. Give me something deeper, something I can really do to help me. They say, this is what it is. Those are the very first steps. So from the baby steps of even understanding what my sorrow is, in these 42 shlokas, it takes me all the way to what is my true nature. Now, what's the context where it comes? In the 11th skanda of Srimad Bhagavatam, there's the section called Uddhava Gita, where Bhagavan Sri Krishna is teaching to his cousin and his friend Uddhava. Where we find in this section a lot of those concepts that come during Srimad Bhagavad Gita, they're elaborated upon here. Whether it's working with that attitude of karma yoga, understanding that Bhagavat Tattva to be a better bhakta, approaching the doorstep of that jnanam to really take advantage of it, what is dharma, how is artha to be used, based on my coordinates of varna and ashrama, what are the duties I have, what should I stay away from, all of this is detailed in this Uddhava Gita, Bhagavan's final teaching before his ascent. And in this section specifically, there's a story that we see tomorrow about why he takes the form of a swan. Therefore, this section is called Hamsa Gita. Before that part comes, however, there's a whole dialogue that we see today between Bhagavan Krishna and Uddhava. Now, how does this start? As usual, just as in Bhagavad Gita, Shri Bhagavan Vacha is how it starts. Now, since this is so expansive, so many shlokas, and we have 4 days, I'm not going to do a lead and repeat of each shloka in Padavicheda. We're not going to go that route. We may take sections of shlokas at a time, but we'll go with the flow of what the theme is. So what is the first shloka we find here? Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Sattvam Rajastama iti Guna Buddhir na Chatmanaha Satvenanyatamo Hanyat Sattvam Sattvena Chaivahi. What is he saying here? He starts by talking about how the qualities of the mind are not the self. Self with a big S. That reality underlying all the changes of the world, that is not this inner instrument that I have. Right from the beginning, I can't come to grips with this kind of thinking. My greatest ally in any endeavor I take up is this mind. The way I'm respected is through the qualities of this mind. The way I am judged is by the qualities of this mind. The way I view myself, favorably or unfavorably, is by the qualities of this mind. This is my face to the world. And the quality of this mind, how does it think, what are its triggers, what are its strengths, its biggest weaknesses, only I can know. I know my mind better than anyone else. But at the same time, this mind is what gives me the most problems. Heaven or hell doesn't exist externally. Gurudev would always say heaven or hell is only in this mind. So what Bhagavan starts with here is, given that that mind is a flow of thoughts, conquer the mind by conquering sattva, rajas, tamas, these 3 gunas. Bhagavan could have started anywhere. He could have said start with pranayama as a sadhana. He could have started with go straight to jnanam, understand what this underlying reality is. He could have said throw yourself into work and purify this mind through karma yoga. He could have said anything. Starts with a simple framework, sattva, rajas, tamas. The way ignorance manifests, the way Maya expresses, is through these 3 gunas. Because when it comes to ignorance, there is so much that is said about ignorance, so much that we look into. What are the causes of this avidya? How does it manifest itself? How do I eradicate it? Where does it even come from is one big argument. So much so that even in this field of Advaita, there are 2 branches that have come about. There's the Bhamati Prasthana, Vivarana Prasthana, where each of them has a different opinion on how avidya comes about, where does it need to be eradicated. All of this is logically gone through. Now, if we jump to that level intellectually, going deep into ignorance to find out what it is, what is the point of doing that without the proper legwork first? At that point it becomes, there's a nyaya in Sanskritam, a proverb, Kakadanta Pariksha is what it becomes. Imagine you get 3 degrees in succession, bachelor's, master's, and PhD. And when you get a PhD, you can put doctor in front of your name and people are very impressed. Kakadanta Pariksha, they say, what is your PhD on? And you say, it's about how many teeth does a crow have? Thesis you wrote on it, field work that you did, new research you've come out with, all on the teeth of a crow. What purpose does it serve? How many lives did that knowledge save? Nothing at all. So like that, thinking I'm this deep Vedantin, I go into understanding how did ignorance come about, why is it like this? This is where lots of questions center around without any kind of context or pragmatism to it, utility value of it. What does all that thinking do to me? Really has no benefit. Which is why starting with these 3 gunas is the very first step that Bhagavan Sri Krishna takes for us here. Now there's good news and bad news here. Which one do you want first? You should want the bad news first, and you leave an optimistic note, right? Bad news here is this mind is defective and faulty. That's not an opinion, that's a fact. This mind is defective and is faulty. The fact that it tells me what to do, the fact that my sense organs listen to it at all times, the fact that it makes the same mistake several times out of addiction to certain things, this mind is weak. Completely weak. That's the bad news. The good news is this weak mind is not my true nature. I'm not stuck with this mind. In fact, this mind is not even real. How can we say that right off the bat? What's the logic presented? That this mind comes and goes. It's not a permanent entity. And we'll see this later on in the coming days, different frameworks of thinking about this mind. But there is a time every single day, in every 24-hour cycle, hopefully for more than 6 to 8 hours, where this mind is not functioning. The deep sleep state, where I have no access to the mind, has no sway over me. Yet, even when that inner instrument is not functioning, I still wake up as the same person I was before. That's proof that my existence is not predicated on this mind. One logic given. Second piece of logic is, anything that is in a cause and effect relationship must come to an end at some point is not real. Any emotional changes I have, any ups and downs in the roller coaster of this mind, is caused by some cause. Therefore, this mind being in effect at all times means it is not real. Now, why is that good news? Say you go to a movie, and you're watching the movie, and there are sad scenes, and you are crying. Hero and heroine break up, So you're crying. This is the worst thing you've ever seen. So sad, hits you right here. And at the end of the movie, the lights turn on and the screen goes blank. And you see this was fiction the entire time. Now, we go through this fiction understanding it's false, emotionally still pulled at the heartstrings. Our reactions are still there knowing it's false. So understanding this mind is also false allows me to go through life, through all these different emotions, all the while knowing it has no reality to it. That's the very first step Bhagavan wants us to take here. Now, why is it that the conversation turns to the gunas then? This is the most easily identifiable framework that I can start working with here and now. When it comes to frameworks of japa will calm the mind at some point. That's some point in the future. Dhyana will bear fruit where I have single-pointed focus on something. That's also remotely in the future. Karma with that attitude of karma yoga purifies the mind. God knows that's way down in the future. But this analysis of sattva, rajas, tamas, these three gunas are a part of my personality on a daily basis, and for my analysis, it's readily available to me. That is the greatest news I can ever get. So in the second shloka, what does Bhagavan address directly at this point? How can this sattva be heightened? How can I increase the level of sattva in my personality? Sattva dharmo bhaved vruddhat pumso mad bhakti lakshanaha satviko pasaya sattvam tato dharmah pravartate. Tato dharmah pravartate. By binding myself to this sattva, dharma increases at that point. Now, dharma in Sanskritam has 27 different definitions. That's not a conservative number. 27 different definitions. What does it mean right here? Dharma here is that mindset and those actions done in a righteous way that lead to that increased devotion. That's the context we have here. Righteous action specifically leading to heightened devotion. That is the promise of high sattva. Now let's pause here and ask ourselves a question. Think about the areas of life that affect us. Usually we don't go to self-help frameworks when discussing Vedanta. But one exception here, there's one framework that looked quite comprehensive. Just in talking about what these areas of life are. 8 basic areas. There's personal development, the physical environment and my surroundings, career and business, wealth and finance, friends and contacts and acquaintances, health and fitness, family. These are different areas. Does this pretty much cover the full ambit of my life, all these different areas? Now, in how many of these areas do I make decisions that affect me every single day? Countless ones. Every decision I make has something to do with one of these areas of life. Now, the deeper question is, in all of these areas, how much does dharma guide my decision making? Does it at all? For example, when we have friends and contacts, that area. Friends and family, what's the difference between friends and family? Friends are those that you choose. Family is the one that you're stuck with. You didn't really choose, you were born into it or they came about. It's the main difference right there. So when it comes to the friends and contacts that I've chosen for myself, what are the different factors I look out before making a close friend? One is similar tastes and interests. That's one. If I want to go to a basketball game with my friend, but they'd rather go to some French art exhibit, you know you've picked the wrong friend. Yeah? That's one. Second is, are they within my social strata? The worst experience is when you hang out with someone who has triple your net worth. Because for them, even the smallest things where, weekend is coming up, let's take a trip to Mexico for the weekend. When the flight cost is there, the food cost is there, the hotel cost is there. For them, it's pennies. For us, it's like burning a hole in our pocket. Money is just slipping away. So when we hang out with those people that have triple our net worth, things don't go well. Pick someone that's in your social strata, Pick on someone your own size, is what we say. That's one factor. Another factor is, do they share a similar outlook on life? Is it that they're focused on money as the highest thing they have to pursue? Is it that they're focused on some kind of name and fame? Is it that they're focused on creating something, producing something that means something in society? What is it that drives them? We look at all of these factors when making a friend. How dharmic is that person? Is that a factor that ever comes to mind? Very rarely. That's not something we really think about. When it comes to the most important kind of alliance, when we marry our kids into another family, we look again at their educational attainment, their income level, what is it that they do occupation-wise, all of these things. Again, how dharmic is that family? Is that something we readily look at? Not a factor that really comes up. In the family as well, in our own nuclear family, we make so many decisions about instilling values into the children, into what path they take, what their actions are, all of these things. Does Hindu dharma play a big role in those decisions? We'd say yes, it does. We bring our kids to Bal Vihar, we make them go through all of these things, they have a good relevance, understanding of their culture, all of this is there. Now the next point I'm going to make, don't take offense to it, just see it as a statement of fact. If we were infusing Hindu dharma into the family unit as much as we think we are or we want to, would there be a disconnect from Hinduism for the kids once they leave the house? If they're as plugged in to the Hindu dharma as we think they are, there would never be that disconnect as they go forward. Yet, what is the case that we see? So from the very get-go, to understand the play of the gunas, Bhagavan makes that first connection of, is dharma being upheld in all of my life situations, or is it really a non-factor? Whenever I have problems in life, is dharma where I turn to see where am I erroneous in dharma to make things right? Because if we look at Ramarajya, those years of fruitful peace and harmony after Bhagavan Sri Ramchandraji won the war against Ravana and had his dominion ruling over Ayodhya, in that beautiful Ramarajya, one man comes to Bhagavan Sri Ramchandraji. And he says, my 8-year-old son died yesterday. And he comes there with the attitude of, Bhagavan, you are held accountable. You give me the answer. Why did my healthy, righteous 8-year-old son die? Because in a kingdom where these things, there's no such thing as randomness in our culture. In a kingdom where something like this happens, where an innocent child dies, that means something is wrong with the policy of the kingdom. Dharma is not being upheld in some instance. And Bhagavan Sri Ramchandraji, being the king, what king? Bhagavan Mahavishnu himself says, let me rectify whatever adharma is going on in this kingdom. Meaning straying from dharma has that much of an effect. Now we see how to infuse sattva into all areas of life. That is the goal to come to. Now, how is that even done? First thing is to understand what is dharma, what is adharma. The first thing. So, third shloka, we get a closer look at that. Dharmo rajastamo hanyat sattva vruddhiranuttamaha ashunashyati tanmulaha hyadharma ubhaye hate. When it comes to understanding what is this dharma, we clearly see that when that virtue of dharma is inculcated, sattva destroys that rajas and tamas. Now, explanation of what sattva is, what rajas is, what tamas is, comes shortly after. But for this moment here, Bhagavan says, inculcation of that dharma kills rajas and tamas. So first we have to learn what is dharma, what is adharma. Let's start with what is adharma first. There are different ways it's defined. First is vidharma. Vidharma is obstructing others who walk the path of good. It's not just that I don't want to do good. Those people who are doing good, I try to stop them. We see this from many walks of life. There was one company where all the employees were paid by the hour. Hourly employees, not a salaried employee. So when you work overtime, you make more. And in some companies, it's 1.5 times more than the regular rate when you work overtime. So whenever there are deadlines, things coming up, they go really slow with their work. As slowly as possible, because the more time you spend just sitting there doing the work, that sometimes goes about 40 hours a week, you get that overtime. So someone else new comes in, and they come in with the full fervor of, I want to work out, and they tell them, hey, slow your roll. This is the way you work here. Okay, we need to slow it down. We learned that attitude from the time that we're kids. When I was in high school, 11th and 12th grade was a combined, like we do in Balvihar here, 11th and 12th grade was combined for Spanish. Not many students in that class, so it was combined. So it's a 2-year process. The first year, even though you're combined, you learn one thing one year, one thing the second year, and the curriculum repeats itself again. So one thing we learned was our high school Spanish teacher was 65 years old when we had her. About 3 years left before she retired. This lady would assign homework, forget to take it up the next class. She'd announce there was a quiz, and she'd forget about the quiz. So we learned this early on, that you don't have to study for Spanish at this school. Why waste the time studying? She forgets about the quizzes anyway. So once we got in 11th grade, our seniors told us this is how the class is, and we enjoyed that 1 year. Then we got to 12th grade. New 11th grade batches in our class. Third week of school, the usual, she'd assigned a quiz and then she was forgetting about it. With 5 minutes left in class, This one 11th grade girl in the front row, it's always the front row people. They're the worst kind of people, the ones that sit in the front row. Terrible, obnoxious, teacher's pet people, front row people. She raises her hand and she says, "Ma'am, we have a quiz today, don't we? You forgot about that." She said, "Oh yeah," and she went and gave us all the quiz. After that, all of us seniors, we took that girl aside. We said, "You ever raise your hand in class like that again, you'll be missing an arm when you walk out of this classroom." There are certain norms that we practice in this environment here. There's a certain culture that we've built up over the past few years. Do not disrupt that culture. You will never again raise your hand. So even from that age, we find when not following dharma, not being honest gives me some kind of benefit, I will follow that. When someone is trying to practice that dharma, we will persecute them, sometimes with threat of physical violence. That's how gundagiri starts at that time in life. So, vidharma, obstructing those who follow the path of good. Now, this was a humorous example, but what's also given in Shastra is those that follow the path of good, naturally they restrain their sense organs. And when that kind of tapasya is done, they gain a special power. Which is why even Shastra says, do not mess with those people who have great vairagya. Don't mess with the sadhu sannyasis. No need to show our dominion over people like that. No need to come into their path and stop them from doing something. Because someone of that caliber of tapasya, even if in a moment of weakness in their mind, say this person should be destroyed for what they're doing, satya sankalpa, that will happen. That will happen. Where that person and their lineage will be destroyed because of it. So hurting those that are doing the right thing, they're protected. Dharma, that's how dharma protects itself, by protecting those who practice it. So vidharma, obstructing others. Paradharma, performing others' dharma. Not focusing on what my duty is, I focus on other people's dharma. 10 years ago, we put on the Gurudev musical here to celebrate Puja Gurudev's 100th birthday anniversary. So about 8 years ago, we put on the musical. There was one kid, he had a small part, and he wasn't happy with the fact that he had a small part, right? It was a minor role. Minor roles are important too. A bunch of minor roles, they support everyone else. Now his thing was, he didn't want to learn his lines. He knew the lines of every other actor in the play. They'd be on stage, they'd mess up, he'd point, "Hey, no, your line is this," and he wouldn't even look at the book. And it was time for his scene to come on. I thought, man, what a great actor, he must know. For his simple scenes, he couldn't do them. I said, "What's wrong with you, man? You know everyone else's line, you don't know your own." Like that in my own life, paradharma is when I know everyone else's lines and what to do in life, I don't follow my own dharma though. And in Bhagavad Gita, it's mentioned several times, same in Srimad Bhagavatam, it's better to do my dharma inefficiently than doing someone else's dharma efficiently. What's the reason for that? My dharma that I must follow is for my growth and to break down my vasanas, therefore I must follow it. Now, as we'll see, every single shloka in this text comes back to the gunas. So even this idea of only following the dharma that I'm supposed to do, how does it relate to the gunas? That when I'm attached to a certain kind of dharma, that rajas really has to come out. I cannot let go of that dharma. Therefore, what I have to do will be painful for me because it's sanding down my vasanas. When we go to the gym and we work out, and this is complete hearsay because I never do that, but when we go to the gym and we work out, lifting weights for the first time, the next day when we wake up, everything is sore. Because what we're expecting is you lift weights for a day or two, you look in the mirror, and before you know it, your shirts are tearing at the biceps, right? That's how I want my life to be. Instead, there's a great soreness. That soreness persists for weeks and months at a time, and the muscles are not getting any bigger. The beginning will be like that. Same with purging of my vasanas. There will only be pain points. As I do my dharma the right way, it seems as though all my desires have to be quelled. I only have to do what I don't like, with people that I don't like, doing tasks I don't like, all the while feeling sore. But at the end of the day, sanding down of my vasanas is a painful process. It should be a painful process. Does that pain subside as I stick to my dharma? That's the test for myself to see, am I growing spiritually? So paradharma, performing others' dharma, is also not encouraged. Abhasa. Abhasa means that dharma I perform, nam ke vaste, just for the sake of saying that I did this. How does this come about? Any kind of seva done for someone else must benefit them in some way. It's not for my own benefit. I should be doing it so that it helps someone. Are they deserving of that seva? Am I doing it the right way? Now, on a macro level, what does this look like? This kind of abhasa. Or I think it was Walmart or one of these chains of stores. They saw that for their employees, many of their employees were making minimum wage, so they saw that they weren't living comfortable lives. The government gave them a voucher saying, here's money from the government to give to your employees so that they can go spend, have their basic needs met, since they make minimum wage. What did Walmart do? They put a stipulation in that where the money they gave to their employees can only be spent at Walmart. Meaning the government is giving them that money, they're giving it to their employees only to spend at Walmart, they're getting Walmart money again. Sorry. But they're getting money right back again. This is that abhasa. On its face, it looks like they're providing someone some kind of benefit, and that looks so beautiful to see. It's just in name only. There's no benefit being given to anyone. This person is actually benefiting from what happened. And we see that in the world of business, and we can throw stones. That happens in the world today as well for individuals and families. And this has been around since the days of the Shastras. Kathopanishad. Nachiketa's story is the narrative that has this knowledge unfold. He goes to his father and he says, you're giving away cows in dhanam for someone else to use, but the way those cows are described is how? Pitodaka. Pitodaka means that cow which is not healthy. That emaciated, patient-like cow that you can see the ribs and all the bones and everything. Pitodaka means that cow that's drank its last sip of water. If you go, that cow will fall right over. Jagdadrana is another word. That cow that looks like it's eaten its last piece of grass. Nachiketa asks, Father, you're giving these kinds of cows in dhanam. Who is that going to help when you do that? Like that, you look at these Goodwill stores or places where people donate used furniture, things like that. It's couches that have cigarette holes in them or, termites have eaten through. Some people donate those kind of things. That if I'm giving to a fellow human being to use that's down on their luck, I should give them something better than I would even use. Real dharma would be giving in that way, but abhasa dharma, just for the name's sake, there's half-hearted effort there in dharma. That's also a dharma. Upama. Upama is not the tasty dish. It is copying others without any understanding of my own inclinations. Now, this sounds very similar to paradharma, following someone else's dharma. Upama is even a step lower than that. That I don't even understand what the benefit of what they're doing is, I blindly follow that. Someone else shows up at a temple somewhere, does something, so I also show up there. Now, in a way, that kind of following someone, emulating someone's footsteps, if it's done for the right reasons, it's a great thing. But if it's for the purpose that this person does this, they get good attention for it, let me do it too, that kind of copycat behavior, also a dharma. Chala, finally, cheating others. Where cheating others comes from a lack of integration. Word, thought, deed. If these are in line, that's complete honesty. Word, thought, and deed. When the word is one thing, The thought I have to inspire those words are something different, and the deed that I commit is something way off of these two. That's chala. That's how cheating someone comes about. That manipulation comes about then. Where every instance that I live from that moment, there's no honest moment anymore. Every moment is, how can I grab and get something from this situation? That kind of manipulation is always turning in my mind, which is exhausting. There are some lies. Having to live a lie for a lengthy period of time is really tough to do. I had a friend that went to Spain, for long-term study. If you speak Spanish, they don't take you for the program very easily. You have to not speak Spanish to get to the program. So this guy wrote in his form, I don't speak Spanish. He does speak Spanish really well. So he goes there. Now, if he's with his classmates and everyone on a bus, someone on the bus, he's overhearing conversation, makes a joke in Spanish, this guy can't laugh. They'll know he knows Spanish. When they're going tourists on the street, walking around, they'll go this way or that way, not being able to read what the sign says. If he says, no, this says go north here, this is the direction, then he'll be found out. He said that was the hardest summer of my life. Trying to act like I didn't know something was so difficult to do, living that kind of a lie. Where he wants to say here, the museum is right across the street, there's what the sign says. These idiots with the map turn the map upside down, they're going this way. He has to roll along with them and say, oh, okay, now we're going here. The whole summer was like that. You know how hard that is? Where you have to be something you're not that fervently? That's what chala does. When I want to cheat the system that way, I have no choice but to live that way. Whether it's feigning ignorance, the other flip side of that is acting like I know more than I actually do. There was a post on Reddit I saw recently. What was the post? He said, when he was getting hired by one company, they said, do you have any special talents? And he said, I play classical piano really well. He just said that. I play classical piano really well. He's never touched a piano in his life. These things sound good to say. 1 month on the job, they came up to this guy and they said, what? The CEO is visiting. He is a huge classical music piano fan. We have a piano. Why don't you play? So this guy's sitting in his car 20 minutes before that, researching ways of what is the most painless way to break your fingers is what he's looking up. What else are you going to do? So feigning ignorance can get me into trouble one way and really hurt my life. Feigning great intelligence and great talent hurts me equally. The easiest thing to do is what? Be honest about what I am. Why have that chala then? It's the easiest thing to do. Just be who I am. That's dharma. Going by what I am. And then without this devotion to dharma, there is no growth in my personality. I can intellectually know what Shastra says, forwards, backwards, up and down, side to side. I can know it thoroughly well. Padavicheda I can do, I can be a pandita at Sanskritam, I can even say beautiful things and talk about it from a stage. If there is no devotion to dharma, none of that means a darn thing. That's what Bhagavan wants to impress upon us. Now here comes my favorite shloka in the entire text. Now I'm sad that it only comes on the first day, my favorite shloka. But this is perhaps the most important one in my mind. Agamopah prajadeshaha kalah karma cha janma cha dhyanam mantrotha samskaraha dashaete gunahetavaha. Dashaete gunahetavaha. When it comes to how can these gunas be classified in a useful way for me to understand, there are 10 instances mentioned in this 1/4 shloka. Now, just looking at this framework, so much becomes clear to me about the gunas. So here the main question of this shloka is, what are those causes for increased sattva? Again, what is sattva? We'll go into soon. What are those causes for that increased sattva? We can see in 10 different ways here. First is agamaha, scripture. 3 kinds of scriptural study. One is that tamasic scriptural study. For what purpose? That I want to steal this knowledge, or I want to learn this knowledge for a negative reason. Shastra can be learned for negative reasons as well. There are certain agamas dealing with black magic, all of these different kinds of knowledges that can cause great destruction. Now, in our pragmatic sense, even today, isn't knowledge used for terrible reasons? The reason I can go through a tax code is to understand how to shelter my black money in the Caymans and no one can find out. I can use a tax code for that purpose. So tamasic is to hurt someone else. Now, what is rajasic way of learning scriptures? This is for that reason that I want to be a well-known scholar. I want to be proficient in this knowledge. Now, just like that question, if a tree falls in the woods and no one is there to see it, doesn't make a sound. Same thing here is, if there is some knowledge and other people don't know that I know it, is it really useful? Think about it. When other people know that I know something, that's when I see the use of that knowledge. I can drop it at a party, just say, I know this, by the way. It impresses people. That's for that rajasic reason. The sattvic agama then, agamaha, scripture in that sattvic sense, is that knowledge which makes me withdraw from action from that external world. That knowledge which purifies my inner instrument for the right reasons. That knowledge not done for an exhibition reason, but for that reason that let me understand what my true nature is, let me strive to get there. Sattvic agamaha. Next one has to do with consumption. Apaha. Apaha literally means water, but in this instance, any kind of consumption then. From the physical level, and we see this in Bhagavad Gita in the 17th and 18th chapters also, tamasic consumption at the food level is that which is stale, putrid, non-vegetarian. This is tamasic food. Where in the world today, if you look at people who are sophisticated, those who are refined, those who have great tastes, a refined palate, it's those who have these rare bottles of wine and consume them, right? 1917 Bordeaux, Tsunami, right? That's all. I've heard of these things. These kinds of things that you have, at the end of the day, it's rotten grape juice is what it is. The longer it's putrefied, the cooler you are when you consume it. That's all it is. So by that logic, then, I can get a Taco Bell taco, leave it on my table for 2 years. I can have that. I should be just as cool. I'd probably die, but I'd be cool. That which is tamasic is seen as the heights of sophistication, is my point. That's given in Bhagavatam as a fallacy of Kali Yuga. That which is tamasic is seen as the heights of sophistication. What is rajasic when it comes to consumption? Food that is overly salty, overly spicy, overly sweet, that causes that kind of agitation. Now, when it comes to our Indian diets, the difference between Indian food and food from the rest of the world, someone explained this beautifully to me, is we went to an Italian restaurant once, and they said this is authentic Italian food. He said, have you ever had real Italian food? I said, yeah, I go to Olive Garden. He laughed at me. No. Authentic Italian food. Where it's so authentic, I couldn't even pronounce what's on the menu. That's how you know if it's real authentic food somewhere. If you can't say the words on the menu, it must be really good. And the price tag was also, So I was eating the food. Everything tastes the same. The pasta tastes the same as the ravioli, as this, as that. Everything tastes the same. I said, dude, everything tastes the same here. It's like a college dining hall, They skimped on ingredients, use the same thing everywhere. He said, no. What you're missing is each taste has a subtlety to it. You really have to hone in on that subtlety. I said, dude, I come from a culture where you put the food in your mouth. Before you even put it in your mouth, you know the flavor of what it is. That's how strong our food is. I don't do this subtle stuff. And then he said, no, the wine pairing also matters. So that rotten grape juice, sophistication, that also has to tie in with the subtlety here. Only then do you understand the beauty of this Italian food. I said, I come from India, man. I can't do this. I'm sorry. So our Indian food is also quite flavorful. It's also can be made in a sattvic way. When we pour on the chili or the salt or make it super sweet, we're actually making it rajasic. Inherently, if we go back to what recipes are really like, our Indian food is quite sattvic. Sattvic consumption is that food which is freshly cooked, or it's not older than 2 or 3 hours. So dabba service then is actually tamasic food. Because ladies, when you go to India for like a month or two, and where I'm going with this, the poor man of the house knows how to do a lot of things, cannot really find his way around the kitchen. After 25 years of marriage, he can make his own tea or coffee, but besides that, and maybe 1 or 2 dishes, but how long is he going to eat sambar every single time, right? So there are different methods. Either they can make food once and they say this is victory and order in the rest of the time, or dabba service where you freeze like 1 month's worth of food, like Nutri-Swiss system, like, three tiers in the fridge, and you label it also so they don't get confused. Day 1, day 2. That's how people that live in a prison eat, right? Take it out like that. And you heat it up and eat it. Now, it seems fresh. That's frozen fresh. Still tamasic food if it's left in the refrigerator that way. So why is this so important then? And what does it have to do with sattva, rajas, tamas? When it comes to the quality of what is physically consumed, that has a direct correlation to the mental makeup of a person. Now, tests have been done, scientific studies, because science is what validates everything nowadays. If I say this comes from Shastra, people say, too, who cares? When I say a scientific study by Yale University says this, then we say, oh, that's amazing. So a scientific study by a top university, they've shown that when what we consider tamasic food or rajasic food is consumed, the mercurial nature in the mind of mood swings, of indecision, of anger, of dullness, all of this is heightened when tamasic and rajasic food is consumed. Because whatever is the grossified 5 elements of what we consume, when it becomes subtle and is nourishing this mind, that's what makes up my mental capacity. And if this entire journey I set out on to follow that dharma, to make that mind calm, to make sure it's optimal and efficient, if that desire is there, it has to start with what is that physical consumption. That is the very first step. So apaha, in this case consumption, is looked at. Third is praja. Praja meaning, what is the company that I keep? As much as in our Shastra, it's given that ekante sukhamasyatam, enjoy solitude, the company I keep is also very, very important. There's one proverb in Sanskritam, Chhatrinyaya. Chhatri, umbrella, Chhatrinyaya. That if you see a group of people walking towards you, 5 of them are there, 4 of them are carrying umbrellas, 1 guy is not, can I still safely say those are the umbrella people over there? I can. That's the majority. Now let's give a different, the nyaya is that, let's give a different one. You go somewhere and 5 people are sitting together. 4 of them are hopelessly inebriated, totally drunk. 1 guy is their designated driver, he's the only one that's sober. Can I still say that group of drunk people? I can't. The monikers we gain are based on the people we associate with. Those that engage in dharma, it's the best kind of people to be with, but when we are in the company of those who are wicked, lethargic, vulgar, our own personality changes that way as well. Where the funny thing is, no matter how old we get, our relationship with the people that are closest to us, we relate to each other the same way we did when we first met. You can be 50 years old. If that's your friend from high school, you will talk to each other the way you did in high school. You can be respected CEOs at this point, whatever it is. The way you greet each other is still that same way you did back then. Some things don't change. Like that is the genesis of a friendship, someone's company. Is it built on a sattvic way that let them help me, let me help them on a spiritual path? Or are the friendships I make for a tamasic reason of simply engaging in foul play? Is it for a rajasic reason that I want something from this people? I need to use them for some purpose. Because one, you may agree with this, one criticism I've heard of kids that are born and raised in this country is, you guys may be book smart, but you don't have the street smarts that you'd get growing up somewhere else. Is that a fair assessment? I've heard that before. Now, even those street smarts can be in two ways. It can be where that which can't be taught, but only has to be observed and understood, that's one kind of street smart. The other kind of street smart is, how do I get ahead of everyone else by any means necessary? If that means telling a white lie, telling, a way to cheat someone, stealing something to get somewhere, those are also street smarts, but where does it lie on the spectrum of sattva, rajas, tamas? That's what I have to look at. Desha and kala are also looked at in this framework. That's the beauty of looking at the gunas here. Because so far we've analyzed personality traits and what we have choice over. Desha and kala is external, not something internal here, yet that even has a framework based in the gunas. Or when it comes to desha, place. Tamasic places are there where I can engage in adharma. And just as there are places that are punya kshetras, where because the people that reside there engage in good, that's where that sthala becomes purified and that purity stays, there are papa kshetras as well. You go to a city like Las Vegas, Nevada, right? What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. I won't go into detail about what happens there. But you look at the surrounding areas outside that 4.6 mile strip area, everything outside there, it's a dead city. There is no big industry. The school systems are weak. There's a huge drug problem there. It's a terrible place to live outside of there. Where because the actions engaged in that place, gambling, casinos, all of this that's done on a daily basis, that has an effect on the wider population there. Where a lot of people's vocations are to support that kind of a lifestyle, that does have an effect. Desha plays a very big role. That's tamasic then. Rajasic desha, places like amusement parks, movie theaters, entertainment, things like this. Where yes, that's seen as an escape from the mundane world, but when it comes to the areas of life, one of them is fun, recreation, activity. When fun, recreation, activity is what I look forward to the most, that is when my lifestyle becomes completely rajasic. Because in college is a very interesting crossroads, where you have the routine of someone who's still in high school, but the people looking over your shoulder like they would in high school, those people disappear once you get to college. There's a newfound freedom, but the tendencies still remain from high school. Meaning it's this environment where Monday through Thursday, let me work hard, work hard, work hard. After that exam, at the end of the week, then I party for the next 2 days. And this cycle continues week after week after week. Where what I look forward to the most is, whenever I feel there's a lack of inspiration during that week, what drives me to perform and actually work is Friday and Saturday I get to party, that's what's done. Where the focus and importance is on those last 2 days, and that's why I'm willing to put up with anything else, that's still rajasic. What are my inspirations to motivate me? Is it something noble? Is it something basic like this? That's what comes up with desha. And then, of course, those sattvic examples of desha is where I can be in tune with this mind. The mind can be calm and quiet. At the end of the day, whichever location I find myself in, if I have a strong mind, Location doesn't matter for the quality of my mind, what it is. A strong mind will be calm no matter what the situation is. Like there are basketball players where right before a game, they're practicing their shots and shooting them, right? Many of them have headphones in. What do you think they're listening to? Music? One of my friends who's an athlete told me what they listen to is the crowd noise at that time. That when you're playing a game like that with their spectators, especially when you're playing on the road, while you're trying to focus on your craft, dribble the ball and try to take it up there, there is that audio system that's blaring and yelling. There are these fans that are yelling at you, saying things that could be from benign things like, oh, you're a terrible player, to the most shocking racial taunts. There are other players and other fans also. It's a different level. Now with the age of Googling, they'll Google the players that are coming into play, find out about their arrest records or those things they're not proud of, yell out those things there. Like if an athlete was dating some pop star or someone and they get divorced or they, break up, then these players will yell that actress's name or something at this player when they're at the free throw line. They'll taunt them that much. I remember long ago, Mavericks were playing the Spurs in the playoffs. Tony Parker's at the free throw line. He had recently been left by Eva Longoria, whom he was married to. In Dallas, someone picked a seat right in front of the free throw line. They had a full-sized 5-foot cutout of Eva Longoria, and they were waving it around while this guy has to shoot the free throw. Now, for someone who has a strong mind, despite any kind of trigger points that are put out by people, that will not affect that mind. They will stay calm. But for me, someone who is weak-minded, who still gets tossed by external reactions, deshaha is such an important thing. The place I find myself directly correlates to, can I build a sattvic mind? Really important for me. Then, of course, there's karma as well. Actions, that tamasic action is that which has no benefit for anyone. Nishiddha karma, harms myself and others. Rajasic action is that which is desire prompted, kamya karma. I want something from it, therefore I go for it. Sattvic karma is nitya karma, that which is done no matter what on a daily basis. Naimittika karma, that righteous action done when the need for it arises. It'll be elaborated later on, so I'm not going to go too much depth into it. The last one we find for today on this section is dhyanam. Contemplation can also be tamasic, rajasic, or sattvic. This is one that's really interesting to see. Tamasic dhyana is that which focuses on negativity, negative forces, to gain some kind of destructive power. Ravana was, and I use the word great here, I don't mean great as in noble. Great here means quite expansive, quite intense. From that standpoint, Ravana was a great bhakta of Bhagavan Shiva. So much so that he had that sakshat darshana of Bhagavan. Same thing with Hiranyakashipu as well. But the reason why their mind rested on Bhagavan is for some nefarious action. That intention is tamasic at that moment. Rajasic dhyana, this is to gain something for personal benefit from that worship. That dhyana ardently done, the mind calmed down. It's for that purpose that let me fulfill my own needs. In dhyana, in this instance, not just what we think of meditation of sitting there and focusing, taking up any kind of action to meet a certain end. What reason is why I do it. We'll have an example that comes up later. So, see the following ways here. The beauty of this shloka is all of the different markers we went through, each can be correlated directly with this framework of sattva, rajas, tamas. There is no kind of action, no kind of internal response, no kind of external happening that cannot be put into this kind of a framework. How easy does that make our vichara then? That's the beauty. And it's not like it's an expansive framework with so many parts to look at. 3 mere components that encompasses every major aspect of my life. So we can never say, after seeing a framework like this, I can never say that Sanatana Dharma does not provide me food for thought. Because one common misconception, one common blame that is placed on religion is this divine entity has put us in this world without any kind of rule book, and people believe that they face merits and demerits because of it. This doesn't make sense. In Sanatana Dharma, it makes perfect sense. That ours is not a religion that says these are clear do's, these are clear don'ts, this takes you to heaven, this takes you to hell. That is not the prerogative of Sanatana Dharma. The framework we have here is for every intention, desire, thought, deed, for all of these, this is what the Sattvika way looks like, that increases your purity. This is the way the Rajasic level looks like, which increases name and fame and may increase power, but doesn't do much for spiritual growth. Here's the Tamasic way that it happens, that only leads to a bad spiral. So detail-oriented when it's given. So we have the rule book completely with us. That's the beauty of this 4th shloka here. Then we come to the 5th shloka. Here, what does it say? Tat tat sattvikamaivesham yad yad vruddhav prachakshate nindanti tamasam tat tat rajasam tadupekshitam. That when it comes to these gunas, it's been clearly laid out when it comes to action and all of these other components. What is sattvic? What is rajasic? What is tamasic? But still, the question may persist that how do we determine what it is? Because in a broad sense, it's been given, but at a granular level then, when it comes to this specific action, this is what the consequences are in front of me. How do I know that the action I'm about to do is sattvic, rajasic, or tamasic? It's reiterated here. That whatever the wise people say is sattva, that is what sattva is. Whatever the wise people censure is tamasic. Whatever they don't provide an opinion on is rajasic. That's what's given here. Now, 2 questions arise from this. Number 1, who are these wise people we're talking about? First question. Number 2 is, when can I decide for myself what is sattvic, rajasic, or tamasic? First question then, who are the wise ones we're talking about? Again, what's given in Bhagavatam in the 12th skanda, that when it comes to Kali Yuga, those people that have the most influence will be the loudest voices. Not who is the one that is the most knowledgeable or has the most qualifications in a field. The loudest voice is the one that people will follow. Think about it. During the pandemic, scientists, everyone said we have to wear masks. Especially in this part of the country. There was a lot of resistance to that and huge loss of life because of it. So what do? The president invited Olivia Rodrigo to the White House to speak to everyone and say, wear masks. Any one of you not know who that is? Most of you don't know who that is, right? Your children definitely know who that is. She's a pop star. For that generation then that resists, when a pop star says, wear the mask, they'll do it. Fauci was talking about the vaccine. A lot of resistance to that as well. What did he do? He did an Instagram live with Ashton Kutcher. Really? People that were getting vaccinated spiked because of that. Because I may not believe in getting the vaccine inherently when the scientist says it, but when the actor who played the pot-smoking Kelso from that 70s show says it, then I'll definitely go out and get the vaccine. Kali Yuga, that's where we live. The loudest voices and the popular voices, even on matters that don't concern their wheelhouse, we take direction from them. And thank God for the right reasons people recognize that and they use them where they have to be. That's what it is. That's the world we live in. So who are these wise people we're talking about then in this day and age? Those that go by that Shastra. But today, what kind of world do we have? Where vegetarianism is a Hindu tenet. When we teach Hindu culture here in high school, that's one of the main chapters Guruji has put in. Vegetarianism, the importance of it. Now, if in the world today, I don't consume meat or alcohol, and the reason is my religion says I shouldn't, I am, what am I classified as? A blind follower who does not think for myself. The same way, when I'm vegetarian, because of the health benefits that I see in a secular way, that, it releases toxins into the body, red meat leads to bad health things, alcohol leads to, from blood pressure to cognitive decline, alcohol does all those things. When I don't consume them for that reason, that is cool in New Age. So, following from Shastra, consuming something, I'm being rigid, old-fashioned, and a blind follower. When I do it for these reasons that new science tells me, I'm cool for that reason. Do we see the disconnect right here? That when I follow something for Shastric reasons, it's scorned at. The same action done, given from a different source, that's seen as such a great thing to do. That's where we're falling apart today. That we don't go by those who study Shastra and master Shastra. We want to hear it from a source that's acceptable for us. Now, how does this relate to the gunas then? I cannot decide what is right or wrong. When we talk about surrender, it's a word that's abused a lot in Sanatana Dharma. We say surrender to the Guru, surrender to Bhagavan. Yeah, I can do namaskar, I can put my head on the ground even. I can dig a hole and even get into that to get even lower to surrender. But at the end of the day, surrender comes to how much control do I cede to a higher authority? First step to that is, do I recognize that I cannot decide what is right and what is wrong? That's a really tough thing to give up. Giving up possessions is fairly easy. Giving up that need for attention, also relatively easy to do. The hardest thing to give up is that conviction within myself that I know what is right, I know what is wrong, I should follow it. That I gets overly bloated when I do that. Now, what Shastra says is right or wrong, I may even disagree with. What the Guru says is right or wrong, I may disagree with that also. That surrender comes when I say, I don't know what's always right, what's always wrong. That's the very first step. And that clearly correlates to the gunas as well. Now, the next question that comes up is, when I make all of these pursuits that I have sattvic, because if I get a dime every time I say the word sattvic in these next few days, I would be a millionaire. That's what this text is all about. Now, what's said going forward here? Sattvikanyeva seveta puman sattva vivruddhaye tato dharmas tato jnanam yavat smritirapohanam. A beautiful step-by-step process is given here. If I make all my pursuits sattvic, the result of that is I abide in dharma. I go by what righteousness is. We've seen that already. That's summed up here. Now the next step on top of that. If I abide by dharmic intentions, dharmic actions, dharmic way of dealing with consequences, all of this, that leads to jnanam, which is the knowledge of the reality of things. Jnanam here, not just that highest jnanam of what my identity is. In all things, do I see what the essence is? Or else I miss the part for the whole at that point. Where any situation is marred because I don't see it in its holistic way, understanding everything for how it is, I focus on one little aspect and my mind gets swayed and I lose my focus completely. It's like going on a road trip. You pack your bags, make sure you have everything you need. Every family member needs a different kind of snack on a road trip, so you pack all of that. Not going to stop anywhere, right? And you head out on your way. As you're going then, you worry about the smallest things. We forget to close the garage even. We leave the stove on. Everything we forget to do things like that. And also where we're going, the GPS won't be right. We put the wrong address in, for instance. We'll be going in a separate direction, everything. But did I get the right snacks? That's the main focus. That thing I'll never forget. Everything else will just go for a toss. My whole endeavor has gone upside down. But the one thing of those snacks, I got that right. What if in my dharmic journey as well, I focus on the little things, forgetting the whole holistic picture? And that happens when I focus only on those things I like or dislike. Everything else seems to fall away. That happens often. So when dharma is abided by, jnanam comes, which is understanding the reality in and through all situations. With that jnanam comes smritihi. Smritihi is defined usually as remembrance. Here, remembrance mixed with that abidance. That because that jnanam, that knowledge is there, when I find myself in any new situation, I can apply that jnanam here. That intelligence comes. Like there's a kid that struggled a lot with math. We have to teach kids in the way they understand. So there's one kid who couldn't understand math for the life of him. And he was a very angry kid too. He used to bully other kids, really bothered them. So one tutor came to him and he said, okay, basic thing, $6 minus $4, how much do you have left? This guy was 2, he couldn't fathom that, couldn't come up with it, 6 and 4. So okay, think of this situation. Billy across the street there has $6. You want to buy something that costs $4. You go to steal Billy's lunch money. You hold him by the throat, give him a few punches, open his wallet, you take $4 left, $4. What's left with Billy? He said, oh, $2 is left right there. Because he's done this several times. This kind of a situation he's well acquainted with, right? So teaching kids in the way they understand things. Another situation then. Another kid couldn't add and subtract either. So his mom, she brought 6 apples. Took away 4. And 2 apples are left, like a very good demonstration that way. Then he got to school for the exam that day, young kid. Going through it, the question is a very similar one. Mary had 6 oranges, 4 she gave away, how many does she have left? He couldn't answer it. He said, when it's apples, I know how to answer it. This time it's oranges, I can't do it. So does jnanam translate to smritihi, where the knowledge is there, can I still apply it in a different situation that's not exactly like what it was before? That intelligence has to come. Because not all situations will be like the ones they are before. There's not always a data point I can go to. Does that knowledge kick in at that time? So far we've seen sattva leads to dharma, dharma leads to jnanam, jnanam leads to smritihi, smritihi leads to apohanam. Apohanam is that destruction of identifying with that which is unreal. Apohanam. That comes from that constant remembrance and constant practice. This is what it leads to. What does it even mean? Identification with that which is unreal. That sounds like a lot of words, but don't really mean anything. My identification with something comes when I value that a lot. Now, from a guna standpoint, when I look into my own personality as well, what are those things in my personality I value the most? Because everything is relative. The reason why we say and label someone as a smart person is because there are people in the world in relation who are not smart, therefore we can say someone's smart. When we say someone is a handsome person, how can we say that? Because there are people in the world who, I won't finish that sentence, but in relation, people are handsome. That's why in one TV show they say that if you want to find a good partner, you want to stand out, make sure your friends are not as good looking as you are. Get worse looking friends. In comparison, you look really amazing that way. Same thing comes to praja, the praja argument we saw before. When I hang out with people who are sattvic, predominantly sattvic, then I feel insecure at some points because they're always righteous and I'm righteous sometimes. When I hang out with people who are tamasic, the worse they are, the better I look then. Some people hang out with people for those reasons. We'd be surprised. So here what's clearly given is that destruction of identification with those that are unreal means whatever it is in my personality I value, whether it's at the tamasic level of how I look, whether it's at the rajasic level of how much money or power or influence I have, whether it's at the sattvic level of what this purity of mind is, what my level of educational attainment and knowledge in the scripture is, whichever level I look at it, holding on to it at a guna level is the wrong thing to do, is what's clearly given. All of that is unreal. Now, objection can be, Hariji, you're saying that even when it comes to knowledge of Shastras, that's not something to be identified with. True. Because which entity is identifying with this knowledge of Shastra? The intellect, this inner instrument, which is permanent or impermanent. Completely impermanent. Why would I hang my hat on that then? Because this quest for moksha is not a job interview. In a job interview, they ask questions like, what is that one skill you do better than anyone else? What is that you can hang your hat on? That one thing that will take you forward. In the spiritual path, if I have that one thing that takes me forward, that becomes my biggest identification. That is unreal in itself. That hurts me at the end. Now then, we talked about sattva so much. Sattva, sattva, sattva is all we've talked about so far, which the next question that arises is, sattva also binds me, doesn't it? Sattva can also be binding. How do I reconcile that? 7th shloka. Venu sangharsha jo vahnihi dagdva shamyati tadvanam evam gunavyatyajaha deha shamyati tatkriyaha. A beautiful example is given here. When you're in the forest, 2 bamboo sticks. And bamboo has this quality where you rub it together in rapid succession, a fire will be created from it. So you rub the bamboo sticks together. That fire gets out of hand, it burns down the entire forest. Now, you drop the bamboo and you run when that fire comes about. Doesn't that bamboo also get burnt then? It also burns away. It's not that the fire says, oh, bamboo sticks, you're the one by being rubbed together, you gave birth to me as a fire, therefore let me burn down everything else but leave you alone. It does not work that way. That bamboo also has to be burned. Similarly, when it's sattva is the vehicle that I've used to attain that highest, even that sattva must verily be burned away. Now, why does this doubt come up in the first place of sattva binding? Tamasic binding, we know all too well. Rajasic binding, we can also see how that happens. How does sattva bind? Because being predominantly sattvic is where I have a clear mind, and a mind that follows what the intellect says, an intellect operating within the bounds of dharma, and a body that is available to me at my command. Now, imagine someone who has control over a lot of people. Napoleon's in the news because of the terrible movie that came out recently. Napoleon's very famous now. It is said that Napoleon's soldiers were so loyal to him that if there's a cliff and he was asking them to march, they won't stop marching till he says stop. If that means they reach the edge of the cliff and they fall over, so be it. We don't stop till our leader tells us to. That's the kind of control he had over them. And for a dude who was 5'2" to have that much control over people, Napoleon complex, he was quite proud of himself. In the same way, where I look at the wider population, and everyone's minds goes this way, that way, but somehow magically my mind halts when I tell it to halt. My body follows what this intellect says. There's that sattvic ego that can rise because of it. Look how pure my mind is. Look how selfless I am when I do things. For as amazing as I am, see how humble I am about it. That statement contradicts, Vadato vyakhyata dosha is what that is. Just by saying it, it invalidates the statement. It's like going up to someone and asking them something. They say, hey, no, I'm in monam today. The very fact that I'm saying I'm in monam today. It was funny, during the brahmachari training course, I think they saw that we were speaking too much. Said, you have to engage in monam then. One day a week, engage in monam. Now, if you just follow what the rules are, that's not a great thing. Everyone follows rules, or most people follow rules. You have to go above and beyond that. So some students would say not 1 day a week, 6 days a week I'm in monam. Which was awesome for us because, thank God. But the first few days they're doing it, what do? One kid actually did this. I'm not even joking. He would write on a slip of paper, I am in monam, please don't disturb me, put it under every brahmachari's door, underneath. In my mind, I'm not going to talk to you anyway, man. I wasn't planning on talking to you anyway today. We want to project that then. Whatever sadhana I do, this and that, talking about it. As tacky as that seems, think about it. To get to that sattvic level then, reliance on objects of the world has been dismissed. We don't get to that level without getting rid of it. Reliance on connections with people, because oftentimes our connections with people are what we brag about. That I know so-and-so, that so-and-so comes to my place. We can brag about these kinds of things. To get to that sattvic level, I have to let go of those connections as well. But even at that sattvic level, I have to have something to feel important about, to feel that people can respect me for. These are the qualities I cling to then. Meaning that human nature and tendency to want to show something off is not gone. The object that I show off is something more subtle, much more noble. That's the only difference there. Because we can look at the three eshanas. Putreshana, Vitteshana, Lokeshana. Putreshana means chasing progeny, chasing those relations with people for the purpose of lust, for the purpose of having children. Putreshana. Vitteshana, objects, wealth, all of these things. Lokeshana, that need for attention, need for validation, need for love and support. Lokeshana. Out of these three, Putreshana, Vitteshana, Lokeshana, what is the easiest to get rid of? Putreshana. I'm not saying this, Shastra says this. Putreshana is the easiest to give up. Where, a really interesting thing Swamiji told me once, even a sannyasi can have putreshana. In what way? Where they see my students are like my own children. Look how great my students have turned out. That's still putreshana from a sannyasi standpoint. Even those who are renounced are not immune to being at that level. That's how pernicious it is. Now, even that is the easiest thing to get rid of. My God. Vitteshana is the next easiest to get rid of. And when I say easy, it's all relative to what lokeshana is. No way is it easy. Just like smart, beautiful, not beautiful, same thing here, right? Vitteshana is all relative. Objects are relatively easy to dismiss. Lokeshana, though, that need to be respected, that praise I want to get for something, that is darn hard to remove. Especially at that sattvic level. Where in Viveka Chudamani, one beautiful point is made. Oftentimes, an intellect that is predominantly sattvic is confused for that Atma itself. Something that is so pristine and pure, something that has the nature of knowledge, something that does not have the roller coaster of up and down, that which does not fall prey to sense pleasures and all of these things, that's a sattvic mind. It can even be confused for Atma. That's how pure and subtle that is. But it's not the end, though. So even sattva can bind. And so that answers that question, won't even sattva bind me? Now going forward, we've completed one whole section here. The next section that comes up has to do with how do I recognize when rajas and tamas are taking me over? Because if Bhagavan had started the whole thing with this is rajas, this is tamas, this is how it takes you over, that's a scary thing to look at. Imagine someone's traveling alone for the first time. When you make that first international trip alone, doesn't matter how old you are when you're doing it, it's still daunting. Passport, this, that, make sure. And what if the person that's, sending you off to the airport, they say always have your hands on your pockets, people can come and pickpocket you. Make sure you never leave anything anywhere. Make sure this is that scares them as they're about to travel. And Gurudev says this, how do you know that someone is worried about being pickpocketed? Meaning, how does the pickpocket know to go and steal from that person? They'll have the money in their back pocket, they'll keep touching that part of it, making sure it's there. That's how the pickpocket knows, the money's in there, and then he goes and takes it later. That worry is there. So setting us up saying, this is tamas, this is rajas, avoid, 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 that's one strategy that could have been used. Bhagavan talks about sattva first. Saying sattvic mindset is what to cultivate. That's aspirational. Leading me towards something is far more inspiring than saying stay away from this, which is lower. Fearless living starts that way. When we talk to our kids, for example, is it always most effective when we say get good grades because, there's this aspiration of you'll get this, you'll get that, you'll be knowledgeable, you'll get all these objects? Is that how we tell them to study hard? Or do we say, you don't want to study hard? See that fast food place? That's where you'll work for the rest of your life. Which is more effective? The second one, because we've been conditioned to respond to fear, not to respond to inspiration. In a Shastric study, things are realistically given, but never from the standpoint of fear what is to come. Aspire to be something else is what's given. So Bhagavan has exhaustively gone through what is sattva, how is it cultivated, why is it important, what does it lead to, all that he's given. Tomorrow we take a closer look at something not as fun. What is rajas and tamas? How do they take a hold of me? How do I recognize that? So this being a beautiful text, the beauty comes in how relatable it is, how I can apply it immediately here and now to my own life. And we see the heights Bhagavan takes us to as the text goes on. And we'll meet tomorrow. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om.